All right, hello everyone. I wanted to welcome you to our weekly, what has become a weekly HR Power Hour. My name is Sarah Skoronsky and I'm the Principal Consultant at EOS Human Resources Consulting. Almost 4 weeks ago now, on March 16th, I sent out an invitation to just our client group to hop on a call to discuss the stay-at-home order that was issued that day by the Bay Area government agencies that was an attempt to stop the spread of COVID-19. As things quickly unfolded, we realized the requirements for our clients and all business owners were changing, and I wanted to keep everyone up to date as possible. So we've continued these online workshops and expanded our invitation list out to our network partners and Facebook friends. So if you're joining us from there, I appreciate you hopping on the call with us. We've received positive feedback from these online workshops, so our hope is to continue to offer these sessions to our audience going forward, and hopefully soon we can begin to discuss topics that are not related to COVID-19. But today we are still continuing our conversation on the evolving government plans to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So today we're going to revisit the FFCRA. We're going to talk about the CARE Act, which includes PPP, ERC, and UI, which is a big alphabet soup, which is something HR people know very well. Just to begin with, I want to let you know that we do have somebody who's monitoring our Q&A, and so if you have any questions during the presentation, please put those in the Q&A, not in the chat. The Q&A allows everybody to be able to see that, and we'll make sure that all those questions get answered throughout the presentation. So just to back up and to do some review, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA, went into effect on April 1st, and it goes through December 31st. And this is important to remember because even when the stay-at-home orders are lifted, this act and the policies that go with it will continue to be in effect through the end of the year. So employers still need to make sure they're ready to manage this as employees come back to work and as we see what happens with the virus, because we're not really sure if there will be another surge, if there'll be another wave of people getting sick. And so these policies will continue through the end of the year. The act covers all employers with fewer than 500 employees, and that's anyone from 1 employee up to 500 employees. And it created paid leave benefits for employees that were impacted by COVID-19, first in the federal emergency paid sick leave, and second was an expansion of the Family Medical Leave Act. And luckily for employers, those payments will be reimbursed 100% through tax credits. And that's reimbursed directly through payroll tax reduction. So you don't have to wait for a return from the government, it's coming straight back to you. So the emergency paid sick leave includes 10 days of sick leave, and it could be for one of 6 reasons. The first is that an employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. The second is that the employee is advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine. And the third is that the employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. And so the first 3 all have to do with the employee taking care of themselves. And then the next 2 is about employees taking care of somebody else. So the 4th reason is about an employee caring for somebody else who is either quarantined or has been ordered to self-isolate or actually is showing signs of COVID-19. The 5th reason is about taking care of a child whose school has been closed due to COVID-19. And the last reason is that an employee is experiencing any other substantially similar conditions specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Treasury, the Secretary of Labor. That is a blanket statement to cover anything that may come up. The Expanded Family Medical Leave Act, in which normally only covers employers that have 50 or more employees. This portion of the act covers all of those employers with 1 to 500 employees, and it's only for somebody who has a qualifying need, which is basically that they're unable to work or telework due to the need to care for their child whose school has been closed. Both of these leaves can be taken intermittently. So it may be something that the employee needs to focus 10 hours a week on their child to help them with their schoolwork. And so you may be working with a intermittent leave on paid sick leave and then on the Family Medical Leave Act. This is paid, as I said, paid by the employer and then reimbursed through tax credits. If they use the emergency paid sick leave for one of the first 3 reasons, which is all about the employee's health, their own self-quarantine, then they're paid their regular rate up to a maximum of $511 per day. If they use the EPSL for the reasons that they're taking care of somebody else who's sick or they're taking care of their child who is home from school, then they must be paid at least 2/3 of their regular rate, which is up to a maximum of $200. And this is in addition to any existing sick leave or paid leave that is offered by the company or that is required by the city or state. The Expanded Family Medical Leave Act, the first 2 weeks of that is unpaid, with the assumption that that would be paid under the emergency paid sick leave. And then after that, the employer must provide leave for up to an additional 10 weeks that's paid. And that is also paid at the 2/3 of the employer's regular rate of pay. So as I said before, these reimbursements will be done through payroll tax credits. And if your tax credit or if your payroll tax is less than what you're paying out, then the IRS would reimburse you. Make sure that you're talking to your payroll providers. A lot of the payroll providers are now setting up codes for this and making sure that there's a way to track this in the system, because you do need to be tracking these leaves and the leave requests so that you can report them back and quantify what credits you are taking. So there are now currently 79 or 80 FAQs on the DOL website about these leave acts, about the FFCRA. And I took from the last 20 questions, which are basically the questions that came out on Monday. And so these are some of the items that were coming up, and I just want to make sure everybody is aware of this. So caring for someone who is under quarantine, that's the options 4 and 5, is taking care of somebody else. They want to clarify this is only an immediate family member or somebody who regularly resides in the home, or someone where a relationship would create an expectation that you would be taking care of it. So a roommate or somebody who's regularly there that you would be taking care of, that you can show that there's a relationship there that you should be helping them out. The next question is about can more than one parent use time to care for a child? Two parents cannot use time at the same time to care for a child, but if it does go on extended, remember this goes through December 31st, so they should be able to potentially one person use their 10 hours or use their 10 days, and then the second person use their 10 days, as most schools now have announced that they're closed through the end of the school year, and then going into the summer. We haven't even thought that far ahead yet, but just make sure that people are not taking this at the same time so that they can extend that time out. Is EPSL or EFMLA to care for somebody else's child? And the answer to that is no. This is the child is defined as the employee's own son or daughter. Another question that came up was staffing companies and how they count their employees. their employees would be counted by both their internal workers and their staffed workers. And I added this in because some people have, some of our clients have employees that are working for other, working on site on a client site similar to a staffing company. So make sure that you are counting those as your employees. And the last question I'm going to cover is, does the non-enforcement position mean business does not need to comply with the FFCRA from the April 1st effective date? There was a caveat in the FFCRA regulation that said that they weren't going to be enforcing this right away. Basically, they were giving companies time to get into compliance. It doesn't mean that you didn't have to enforce it for those 30 days, which ended on April 17th because of when the act was put into place. But it does mean that as long as you are trying to comply with this, then you are okay. So in terms of best practices for our employees, remember that you should have an emergency paid sick leave policy, an emergency family medical leave policy. These are required through the end of the year. So you need to have this in case somebody does show signs or needs to take care of somebody in regards to a COVID-19 related absence through the end of the year. You need to have written requests for the leave. The leave request needs to say what days they want to take off, when they're going to, what the reason is for taking those days off. You may not, there still is question about what kind of certification is required, but you should say that you may request certification if you feel that's necessary. And then you may also ask for the name of the doctor if the person is saying that they're being told to stay at home. And then the DOL notice, this should go out to all employees, all active employees, so that they know what their rights are. And if you are having employees work from home, you want to have a work from home policy so that people know what their expectations are and how when they're expected to be online and available, and kind of defining that structure in this very odd and unusual time. For essential businesses that are still running, effective this past Monday, there were requirements for social distancing policies and infectious disease policies so that people know what is expected of them while they're at work and how to protect themselves while they're at work. So I'm going to give EOS HR a shameless plug here. I usually try to make these all informative, but we are offering a pandemic policy package. We will help you create these policies so that you have them available and help you get them distributed to your employees. This is a $149 value, but we are offering it for $99. It does include all of the documents as well as a phone consultation with one of our consultants so that you understand what the policies mean, so that if you're getting questions from your employees, you're able to answer those. All right, before we go into the CARES Act, Alicia, are there any questions that we need to answer?
All questions that have come in so far for the Q&A, I've answered.
Okay, anything that might be pertinent to the rest of the group that we want to give a shout, give some?
So one of the things that I think would be good for the group is kind of defining the quarantine order for the for the first reason that an employee can request the emergency paid sick leave. And so it's not according to the shelter in order for our local Bay Area. It's, as defined by the CDC. That's what they mean when they're talking about the quarantine for employees.
And actually, let me give a little more insight on that, because there was a Q&A question about this, and I specifically chose not to address it because it can be very confusing, because there was a change that came up from the DOL this past week on this. What they have said is that if an employee is forced to stay home because of a shelter in place or a stay-at-home order, they could potentially be eligible under FFCRA for emergency paid sick leave. However, that would be with the caveat that the business is still open and running and they are not able to telework. So in most cases, if the company is able to offer telework, then they wouldn't be eligible for sick leave, and or if the company has completely shut down, they would not be eligible for sick leave. But if the company is up and running and working, and still able to continue their work, which in most cases the companies can't because we're in a stay-at-home. It's a weird like what is it? The dogs chasing their tail kind of thing, where you're not really sure who's in charge there, but there was some additional information that came out that said yes, they could be eligible, but if the company has to close, then they wouldn't be eligible, which is why I didn't mention it earlier, because in most cases, if the company is closed, they would not be eligible for that. I hope I didn't confuse people more, because even when I was reading it, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they say that? So anything else, Alicia?
No, that was all. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, and I'm sorry that I didn't address that, but like I said, I was hoping it wouldn't come up, because in most cases it's not a situation, not an issue. So we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, aka the CARES Act. They love their acronyms. And so really high level, this is like the 100,000 foot high level of the CARES Act. It offers $290 billion in direct payments to eligible taxpayers. This is the check we're all waiting to get in the mail. It offers $260 billion in expanded unemployment insurance. I'll talk about that. $150 billion in state and local governments, $510 billion in expanding lending for businesses and local governments, $377 billion in new loans and grants for small businesses. I'll talk about that. And $127 billion for hospitals for ventilators and other equipment. So I'm really just going to focus on the unemployment and the loans and grants for small businesses, and even that will be at a high level, so we can discuss that. I do want to put the disclaimer that I am not an attorney. I am not a tax advisor. So if you want more information, please make sure you're talking to legal counsel or tax counsel to determine what's going to be the best strategy for you. This is just the information that I'm presenting is what I've kind of pulled together based on all of the information that's out there, and tried to make it as easy to understand as possible. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Payroll Protection Program, or PPP. This covers employers with less than 500 employees, and it's looking at your payroll costs for the previous 12 months or for the 2019 calendar year. You have to have been in business effective, I believe it's February 15th. So you can't have like just started a business and go ask for the payroll protection loan. The loan offers you 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost, up to $10 million. Independent contractors do not qualify as employees for the PPP, but independent contractors and sole proprietors can apply separately for a PPP loan. So anybody, any independent contractor, if you know a practitioner of some type, they can apply separately for their own PPP loan to replace their income that they may be losing. And the payroll cost includes gross wages, for up to $8,333 per month per employee. And that 833 is the equivalent of $100,000 per year. So anything over $100,000, and this was a question that seemed to get confusing. If you have an employee who is earning $150,000, they're not disqualified. It's just the amount over $100,000 that is not considered for this loan. It is a forgivable loan. In order to be forgiven, the loan must be used within 8 weeks after receiving the funds. The funds can be used for payroll costs, group health care benefits, vacation time for employees, family sick or other leaves, retirement contributions, state and local taxes, rent, utilities, and interest on other debt obligations. You can pay current mortgage interest, rent, water, gas, electric, telephone, and internet during that 8-week period. You cannot prepay for anything during that period. But if you use more than 25% of the funds for expenses other than payroll, then the amount that can be forgiven may reduce. The PPP it's an SBA loan, but it's managed and everything's managed directly with your bank. My understanding is that you really need to go directly to the bank that you already bank with. This is not the time to go out and find a new banker. You will probably be put at the bottom of their list. So you want to make sure that you're working directly with your own bank. You want to have, when you apply for this, you want to have as much information together as possible. You need to have the report. Most of the payroll systems are providing a report which will help you calculate what that monthly average is for your payroll costs. You also need to get your 941s together, your tax returns, have that available, and any other, you might need to get a P&L together as well to show the bank. Again, because this is being managed by the banks, each bank may have different requirements. So you need to look at what your bank is asking for, but the payroll records, the 941s and the P&Ls are pretty common. And then there's an application with a few simple questions. And if you pull all this information together, generally getting the application submitted shouldn't take you too much time. The next thing is the employee retention credit. This is 50% of qualified wages paid after March 12th and before January 1st of 2021. The maximum amount of qualified wages considered is up to $10,000 per employee. So the maximum credit is up to $5,000 per employee. And really the ERC is attempting to get people to continue to pay their employees so that they don't go into the unemployment system and they don't kind of get sucked into some of these other systems. And we're keeping people working and productive. Excuse me. So if you have either fully or partially suspended operations and you can bring these people back and you can make this payment, then again, this credit will come from your against your employer portion of Social Security tax. So the important thing to remember is that you cannot do an ERC and a PPP at the same time. You can only do one or the other. And you need to determine which is going to be more beneficial. And really it depends on how much your employees are earning on average. If you have a lower earning workforce, then it may be more advantageous for you to look at the ERC versus if you have people that are closer or over that $100,000 annual salary, the PPP may be more advantageous. So again, make sure you're talking to your tax advisor or your CPA or bookkeeper to figure out which one of those is going to be more advantageous for you. The other thing to keep in mind is that the ERC is only, large businesses are only eligible for the ERC. So any employer with over 500 employees would be eligible for this. and that sole proprietors and independent contractors are only eligible for the PPP. They cannot apply for the ERC. So just a couple things to keep in mind there. Before we move on to the next topic, Alicia, is there any questions that we need to address?
One comment that came in, it said, it is my understanding that an employer can have both. They just cannot use both funds to pay the same extent. Can you elaborate on that?
That is not what I read. You can have, the ERC is different than the EIDL. Let me make, so you can have the EIDL, which is the emergency injury disaster loan, which is a loan under the SBA. You can have the EIDL and the PPP at the same time, but the ERC and the PPP you cannot have at the same time, as far as I know. And but I will look into that, and when I send out the follow-up, I'll try and respond to that directly.
Next question, is the ERC also handled through a bank?
The ERC is a tax credit. So like the sick leave, it's a reduction in the tax that you would pay through payroll.
And another question, can you do ERC for April, for example, and then PPP for May and June?
That one, you're gonna have to check with a tax advisor or a CPA. That one I don't know an answer to. I can try and find out, but you would definitely want to double check with your tax advisor.
And that was all we had for now.
All right. Okay, so we're going to move on to unemployment provisions of the CARE Act. So there are 3 unemployment provisions: the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, and the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And so the CARES program will be administered through the state agency. So the unemployment provisions of the CARES Act, all of this has to go through our state agencies. So in California, it's EDD. Each state is responsible for establishing a system to address the guidelines provided by the Department of Labor. And the act provides for 100% funding for the first week of unemployment. So this makes sure that in some states like California, generally there's a 1-week waiting period, and this eliminates the 1-week waiting period for California. So the PUC, the Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, is this is the component that pays the additional $600 in addition to any state unemployment compensation that an eligible employee would earn. So an employee who is laid off or is furloughed, and whether it's a complete reduction of hours or a partial reduction of hours, as long as they're eligible for state unemployment compensation, then they will receive that plus $600 per week from the federal government. So they must meet the eligibility requirements pursuant to the state unemployment compensation program, and that's always determined by EDD, and it would be determined in part by what the employee puts on their application when they're applying for unemployment. To qualify for the federal supplement, the employee filing for partial unemployment, so if they're not fully unemployed, but their hours have been reduced or their pay has been reduced, they must qualify for at least $1 of benefit under state unemployment benefits in order to qualify for the $600. And in addition to receiving the $600, they're also entitled to an extended unemployment compensation for up to 39 weeks in most states. And the $600 supplement will end on July 31st, 2020. So this is a supplement just through this first couple months as we're figuring these things out. And a lot of these things may shift or change as they have been on a weekly basis. I know that they're already working on a CARES 2 Act, so these dates are what's in the Act right now, and it's a lot of wait and see to find out if this will continue further and what the impact will be on businesses. The second part is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. This is the portion that is specifically for independent contractors and self-employed, or people who work part-time and would not have been eligible otherwise for unemployment, or people who may have exhausted their state benefits already. So they have to demonstrate that they are otherwise able and available to work but cannot due to COVID-19. So any of the practitioners, if there's a solopreneur or sole proprietor, that if they're unable to work because they cannot, they're in shelter in place or stay at home orders, then they would be eligible for this. They would receive an amount under the state program. It doesn't specifically say what that is. That will probably be determined by EDD in California, but they also will receive the supplemental $600 under the federal program. They will be entitled for up to 39 weeks. And again, they're eligible for this through July 31st, 2020. And then the last part, the emergency unemployment compensation, is for people who have exhausted their regular unemployment. This just gives them 13 weeks additional of time. Normally I believe in California, it's 6 months of unemployment. So if somebody has already exhausted that time, then it will extend that for another 13 weeks. Any questions about unemployment?
No questions, just one comment. So I know a lot of employers had questions about when the additional $600 benefit would be available. And so about 24 hours ago, they just released that the funds have been given to California, and that the first payment should start going out on Sunday. And so but this will be for people who have already signed up and been approved for unemployment benefits. And those will be for payments starting April 11th.
Okay. So the money is coming, which is great to hear.
That little bit of info.
Thank you. Who was that from?
I'm sorry.
Who posted that?
It was a New York Times article.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know that, like I said, this is changing on a almost hour by hour basis. So I tried to pull as much information as I could, and even today I was noticing that some of my information was out of date. So it's coming fast and furious at us, and we're just working to stay on top of it.
Right, things are changing very rapidly.
Very rapidly. So, all right. So I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about managing our workers during this time, and the different options. And some of these, if you've sat in on the calls before, we've talked a little bit about these, just a little more detail. If you are able to offer your employers or employees the option to work from home, you want to make sure that you're managing them correctly. Non-exempt employees, you want to make sure that you're still abiding by the same wage and hour rules. Timesheets, meal and rest periods, all of that still apply. You want to make sure that you are reimbursing for supplies that you're requiring them to get. If it's something that's short term, if it's something that they're choosing to do, then that's one thing. But if you're suddenly requiring them to purchase their own computer to do work, that's something else. And you need to look into why you're asking them to do that, or if it's possible for the company to do that. You want to make sure that you're protecting confidential information, both the companies and the employees. So making sure that you have some type of secure network in place, a VPN that people are using. Make sure that you're talking to your IT providers and get that set up as quickly as possible. And remember that employees are still covered under workers' compensation. If they are working, if they are on the clock for the company and they injure themselves, even if they're in the home, they are still covered under workers' compensation. So make sure that you are addressing that, and as well as making sure that they have a workplace that they can try to be focused on the work they're doing. This is a really strange time. Everybody is home, kids, significant others, roommates, all the animals are there, and so it may not be possible to always be in a focused space, but you want them to be as focused as possible. And again, as I mentioned earlier, make sure you create a temporary work policy, a temporary work from home policy, so that you are setting that expectation with them of what you need them to be accomplishing while they're working, and being considerate of the fact that they may be more distracted now than they would normally if they were working from home under circumstances where they were the only person working from home. But be considerate of that as you're making the policies and enforcing the policies. You also want to stay engaged with remote workers, and you want to do regular check-ins and allow for time to socialize in the beginning of those. Some people are going crazy. As an introvert, the first couple weeks of this was great for me, and even I'm going a little stir crazy and getting a little cabin fever. So it's important to recognize that this is different for all of us, and we're all adjusting. And it's also really important to stay not only engaged work-wise, but socially, and to make sure people are okay. Allow for flexibility. Recognize that people are not going to be sitting at their desk from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and they may need to work for a couple hours and then walk away and then come back. Make sure you're sharing any wins. This can be a really frustrating and depressing time for people, and so when good things happen, make sure that you're sharing them. A lot of the audience out there is small businesses, and the employees you have working for you are as invested in your company as you are as owners. And so when something good happens, make sure that they know about that. And then try to do something fun. Get on Zoom and do a coffee break or a dance party, or do something fun with your office mates. I have my two office mates there in the picture. It's my Duncan and Mac, or my buddies here, and they have a wonderful life, and I'm frequently envious of them. But maybe have something fun on Slack or on Zoom, or however you're communicating, that people are getting to share a little bit more about who they are and how they're surviving through this strange time we're in. If you are managing people on extended furloughs, so if people are not working, you want to make sure that you're communicating any changes to the return to work date. We had our original scheduled time was to come back to work on April 7th. Well, that's come and gone, and have those people been communicated with to know that you haven't just forgotten about them, that they're still on your mind, and the next time we're checking in is at the end of April, when our next return to work date has been set, or our release date, so to speak. Make sure you're deciding how and if people can use vacation time if they have it. That's an expense that you may not be able to incur at this time, and it's okay to say, we need you to wait to use this, and they may want to wait to use that, so that they can actually take some time to do something fun rather than sitting at home in self-quarantine. Make sure you decide how long benefits will be covered. You know, we're coming up on the middle of April here. Right now, most of our clients have decided to extend benefits through April, but you may need to look at some hard decisions as this extends. If this extends into May, are you going to continue to cover those benefits? So those are things you want to discuss, strategize on, look at the pros and cons. We just don't know what the next thing is going to be with this. And so we want to be as prepared and have options on the plate so that you know what you want to do moving forward. And if you do decide to actually release somebody, remember that you want to make decisions fairly in who you're deciding to release. You want to be very careful. This is, you know, I've had a number of clients who have chosen to use this as a time to release people who are poor performers. You just want to make sure you still have things documented so that when people start back to work, if they're looking to come back, you have a documented reason why you're not choosing to bring them back. Make sure that you're not doing anything that would look like you're singling out a specific group of people. So you don't want to be discriminating against a group of people. You don't want everybody you're laying off to be an older group of people or all one gender or all one ethnicity. And make sure when you are communicating that your decision that you're doing that with compassion. This is a very stressful time for everybody. Make sure you have as much information about the unemployment programs that are out there so that they know that they're not just sort of being kicked to the curb, but that you're making this decision based on what you need to do, but you also understand how hard this is for them. So before we move on, I just wanted to check in. Are there any other questions that we need to address?
I believe that most of the other questions that have come in to our Q&A, you've answered live, but let me just double check, make sure. Yeah, I think you've answered most of the questions that have come in live.
Okay, great. So I wanted to, as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to invite everybody to the next seminar that we're going to be doing next Thursday, April 16th. We're going to be doing the second in our Remote Strong series. Last week we did an overview for Remote Strong. This is about creating and managing a remote workforce. And going forward, we're going to be taking each of those items and digging deeper into them. And so next week, we're going to start with setting your battle rhythm. So just so you know, Freedom Makers is a company that is a group of virtual assistants that are military spouses. So a lot of the conversation, a lot of the lingo is military based. And so in our corporate world, this sounds more like setting your cadence or setting your drum beats. But it's really about setting up a process and making sure that you have a communication rhythm, that you have a process rhythm, that things are moving in a pattern so that employees can know what's expected of them and can work within that so that they can succeed. So that will be next Thursday, the 16th at 11 a.m. and you're welcome to register for that. It's another free webinar. We hope you will join us there. And just wanted to wrap up with a quote of, "I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination." And I think that's very true right now. This is a very, very unprecedented time. And if people are open and creative and don't shut down, there could be opportunities in this. We just need to be open to adjusting and shifting our direction a little bit to see where that wind might take us. So I wish you all the best of health and happiness and safety. And if there's anything you need, I will stick around for a couple minutes on the call. If you have any other questions, we're happy to answer them. And as always, thank you for joining us.
We're just getting a lot of thank yous, so I'm returning the thank yous.
Awesome. Well, thank you all.
A question that came in, do you happen to know if an S Corp can issue themselves a 1099 to qualify for the PPP? And thank you.
I'm not sure about that. I'm assuming that's if an S Corp, if the person didn't pay themselves as on the payroll, then then if they issued themselves a 1099, I would think they would be eligible for a PPP, but we might have to dig into that one for a little bit.
Yeah.
But since they didn't give themselves payroll, they would probably be treated as like a sole proprietor on that.
Okay.
Yes, I see that question, Shauna. Yes, please let me know what you find out on that. That's a great question. All right. Who else left on the call?
Let's see. Oh, can you please tell us what the EPSL stands for? Quick Internet Search Proves Inadequate. So that's Emergency Paid Sick Leave.
Yes.
You're welcome, Elizabeth.